Welcome to Supernatural Circumstances, the podcast where we take you down the rabbit hole into the fantastic world of the strange, paranormal, and the unknown. I'm Morgan Knudsen. Come along with me on this week's adventure, and it's an adventure. Guys, Halloween wouldn't be complete without, well, a ghost hunt, right? And today I'm being joined by one of my favorite people, Mr. Paul Bestall. Anybody who listens to paranormal podcasts will know the Ghost Story Guys and Mysteries and Monsters podcast, which is one of my favorite podcasts. This guy is so fantastic. He's so full of knowledge, and his shows are always so in depth. And that's what I really, really needed when it came to this particular episode. Today we're talking about a very famous case who many of you will recognize now from the latest film, The Conjuring, The Last Rites. And that is the Smurl Haunting. Now, this case has popped up throughout history, just really randomly throughout the parapsychology history, playbook, you name it. Every once in a while, this case kind of surfaces. And for those who don't know it, this is a case that revolved around a couple by the name of Jack and Janet Smurl and their children. And I would tell you guys the date took place in Pennsylvania, except nobody can really settle on one. What the heck, right? Why is that? Now, what makes this case even stranger is that this case hit the press and hit the media in a huge way. So you'd think, right, after books being written on it and films being made about it, people would be able to settle on the facts. But, well, that's not entirely true. There's been a lot of speculation about the Smurl Haunting, and even though the Conjuring movie hit the box office and did really well, it also got a lot of things wrong. So today, we're taking a deep dive into the strangeness of the Smurl Haunting, and by the end of this episode, well, you can judge for yourself. Let's go. Well, Paul, welcome to Supernatural Circumstances. Finally, after we were running into so many problems the last time that you were here. So I'm so glad that this has worked. You're here. We're here to talk about this absolutely landmark case. So glad you're here. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me back. It's always a pleasure to spend time in your company and chat about the paranormal. So yes, and you've served me up a right doozy here, haven't you?
Oh God, yeah. Well, I mean, I think the case has to be talked about for a couple of reasons. Of course, it's all over theaters, first of all.
Yes.
Right now, for anybody that has seen The Conjuring, The Last Rites. This is the latest chapter in the Conjuring films, and for many people that know the original cases behind the Conjuring films, we all know they're usually quite different than what's actually presented on screen. And I like to use this platform and our knowledge to be able to clear stuff up for people. But there's also, I think, a lot of pieces within this case that are worth talking about from the education standpoint as well, for people that are dealing with similar situations. So I am so ready to dive into this. There's so much.
Yes.
Let's talk a little bit about this. Where did this start? We're sort of taking a trip to Pennsylvania, 1970s. Yes. What happened?
Well, here's the thing. Because when you look at the case overall, there are 3 start dates, depending on who says what when. And that's the joy of print. And
yes.
Newspapers uploading interviews with people. Obviously, I would imagine in those days people weren't sort of cross-referencing things. So, shall we suggest what how the story hit?
1973?
Allegedly. So when the story became famous and the book came out, the Smurls had said that this started within about a year of moving into this house. So they had a bit of a strange journey to the house, because they were living in another part of Pennsylvania that was hit by a freak hurricane in 1972, and they lost everything. Their entire home was flooded out, and the local council condemned the area and forcibly moved all the residents out. And at this point, the Smurls were kind of stuck. So Jack, who's the dad, his parents bought a duplex. And the plan was that the family, because there was Jack and his wife and the 2 children at the beginning of this, obviously another 2 turn up later on, a pair of twins, which adds a bit of spookiness to this, all decided to move in together. It was a bit of a doer-upper, I believe the term is, and so they began to do some renovations and things. And according to the book and the first film, because obviously there's been 3 films of this.
Yes, it's very popular.
It started once the renovations had begun. Tools started disappearing. They started hearing bangs and noises. Apports. People claim to hear voices in empty rooms. Scratching. Strange things going on. There's a very odd story about a carpet that apparently when they had it delivered, it had got a weird stain on it. But they kind of went, that's okay. We'll clean it. Rather than send it back and say, excuse me, I'm not accepting that. So they laid it, they cleaned it. Apparently the stain kept coming back. You've got allegations of strange prints appearing on the walls. And even though it was repainted time after time after time, these strange markings would appear. Scratch marks everywhere. The bathroom, the toilet, the sink, all apparently had these enormous gouges in them. The walls had gouges in them. All electrical items would blow up regardless. Even when they weren't plugged in, things would blow up. And this apparently was going on for so long. And eventually, after 10 years of hell, they reached out to the church. The church allegedly said, no, we're not helping. Which is a bit odd. The other aspect of this is the Smurls were devout Catholics. Like, they went to church every Sunday, did mass. They were all in on it. So eventually they reached out and a mutual acquaintance recommended that they get in touch with the Warrens. And the Warrens arrived and said, right, they came in, and as far as they were concerned, they fetched one of their psychics, which is quite unusual because usually it would just be Lorraine, but this particular first instance, they fetched a lady in who I believe was a nurse. I've forgotten her name, I do apologise. And she claimed that there were 3 ghosts and a demon in the house, and it was the demon that was really annoyed. The other ghosts were okay, and therefore that's what was causing the problems.
Right.
And so the Warrens said to the family, the best thing we can do now is essentially shame the local Catholic Church into helping. So we're going to go to the press. And that's when the maelstrom began.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, and it very quickly went downhill from there. I think is the politest way I can talk about it.
You're being very kind. But yeah.
I'm trying to state the case before we actually look at the facts. I think is the best thing I can say there, Morgan.
I agree.
And I suppose one of the great aspects of this is here we are in 2025. We have newspapers.com where you can view the original interviews. And I think if you read more than 4 or 5, you'll begin to start going, hang on, as well as the infamous, and I don't know if you've ever watched this, there is an episode of Sally Jessy Raphael on YouTube.
I have not. Is there?
Which is nearly an hour long. And it's from 1988, I think. And it's got the Smurls, the Warrens, all the neighbours, and Joe Nickel.
Is that the one where the Warrens, Ed gets in a bit of a tiff with somebody else on stage? Is that the one? Because now I think I know the one you're talking about, and I wasn't connecting with the Smurls, but I do remember the...
He's just shouting at people.
Yeah. It turned into a Jerry Springer.
Yes, essentially. And so that is all on there. So this is 1988. So it's not even one of those where people have looked at it 20 years later, 30 years later, and gone, hang on a minute, this doesn't make sense. Even in 1988, there were a lot of problems here. I mean, the best thing about that particular episode is that there is a woman there who has turned up with receipts. And she's livid. She's really annoyed with the Smurls. She's really annoyed with the Warrens, and she's got a big folder with her that she's got under one arm, and she keeps waving a newspaper at them, saying, "You said this then." And they'll say, "No, we didn't." She'll go, "I've got it here. I've got it here." And yes. So I would imagine if anybody really wants a bit more depth to it, if you just put the Smurl family, Sally Jesse Raphael on in YouTube, you'll be able to look at that in all its glory. It's one of those as well where they're still arguing at the end and the credits are going up.
Yeah,
you know, like they used to put the credits over the show.
Yep.
And you've just got Ed shouting at Joe Nickel.
Which was very typical of Ed, by the way, because he was so... He tended to be on edge. Like we had...
Yes.
This was when Mike was still co-hosting, we had Andrea Perrin on... to talk about the Perrin haunting and the first Conjuring film. And,
yes.
That was the one thing that she remembered specifically and recounted on the show, that Ed and Roger, the father, ended up nearly going to blows at one point in the house. And it set off a whole chain of an explosion of activity, because usually that's what happens in these hauntings. When you get these unstable moods, you'll see things explode, and that's what happened. But they had a massive falling out, and there was like they made up, but it was really hairy. So not untypical of Ed's fire.
Yes, it's not the only evidence of that kind of behaviour either.
No.
I've seen other interviews with him where he gets extremely belligerent very quickly, shall we say. And so, in essence, once it had gone public, the Catholic Church decided to get involved, allegedly. This is where it gets very confusing as well. There's about 6 different fathers that are involved. But then the Warrens decide to go back to somebody that they'd worked with previously. Is it Father Brown, his name?
That rings a bell, yeah.
And he came, and apparently he did one exorcism, and that made things worse. So then he came back and did another one, and apparently that made things all right for 3 weeks. And then it started again, and then the third time he came, apparently that calmed it down. But at this point, the Smurls had had enough, and they went. And somebody very quickly moved into the house, and surprisingly, nothing seemed to happen when somebody else was in there. Nothing came with them either, so there weren't any reports at the new property they'd moved to. And essentially, the Smurls just basically said, right, well, we're done with this. We're not doing any more interviews. We just want to get on with it. Which surprised everybody 6 months later when the book came out.
Right.
And everybody said, hang on, I thought you said you didn't want to talk about this anymore. And then the Smurls and the Warrens had fallen out, because at this point, the Warrens refused to let the Smurls do any interviews, and basically it was their story now. And so I believe that, as strangely enough, as with Amityville quickly fell apart over revenue and royalties, it seemed that the Smurls hadn't read the small print of the contract they'd signed and realised that 85% of the profits of the book were going to the Warrens and not them. The other aspect of this is the author of that particular book has refused to even talk about it for 25 years. He made a statement early 2001 and said, I can't take back anything I did in regards to this book, but I'd just like to say that I don't stand by it, and I wish people would stop asking me about it.
Interesting. That speaks volumes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And so, as with anything, Morgan, this seems to be one of those cases that has become elevated on face value, and depending on people's belief systems in the veracity of the investigators involved. When you look at the case, there's a lot of red flags, I have to say, on a variety of levels. But I'm sure we can chew those over after that very brief synopsis of this 18-month, 5 years, 13-year haunting, depending on which interview you read.
Absolutely. That I think was pretty perfect. And yeah, like you were saying, so many issues with this. And I think a big part of it was the fact that as soon as you get the media involved, you've got a problem. because you've lost control of the narrative at that point. I mean, as somebody who's been in the press for a very long time, you have to be so insanely careful where they go, because people forget they're always chasing the numbers. They're chasing the story, they're chasing the numbers. So anytime you get media involvement, especially on something like this where it's personal, I mean, like haunting phenomena, all of that stuff, that's a personal thing that's going on. And most of the time they don't care. They're putting it out there. So what was the first thing that stood out for you that said, something's not right with this?
Refusing to let anybody else come into the house when the Warrens had turned up. I mean, Psychop are the key. I wouldn't necessarily say they're the enemy here, but obviously Psychop at the time were one of the most forward-thinking paranormal organisations in America.
Sure. Yeah.
They offered a free evaluation. They offered a free investigation. They even offered to put the family up in a 5-star hotel for a week, all expenses paid, to allow them to come in. They were consistently refused access at every opportunity. I think it was Paul Kurtz who was in charge of Psychop back then. He rang the family 3 times. 3 times he was told, "Oh, we'll get back to you and let you know." And after the 3rd time, and they didn't bother getting back to him, he just we'll go public with this then, because this is when the contradictions begin. Because obviously Mrs. Smurl says, "Well, I did ring the Psychop office back, and they told me we'd watched too many horror films and we were very scary, and we just didn't understand what was going on, and they weren't interested." There is no record of that conversation. The Smurls cannot prove phone records for this conversation. Then they said, "Oh, well, we called them from a phone box." Right, okay.
Why would you call them from... Yeah, like, that's just very strange.
Yeah, and at the time, Psychop's operational model was, if somebody rang up with a claim, they would take basic notes, and then they would give them the PO box address and say, "Right, we'd like you to write a report on everything you've told us and send it to this address so we can start the case file, and then we can work on from that point." None of that happened. They didn't send anything. They didn't mention being asked to send anything. And like I say, Psychop said, they never rang us. They never rang us at all. If you've got people who say, "We want to come and support you, we want to help you, we think you're telling the truth on face value, let us help you," why would you say no to that?
Yeah, and I mean, the only thing that I could think of is that you're now taking direction from somebody else that's saying don't reply. Like, yes. That would be where, because I can't think of another scenario. Or they were just like, if they were, I guess this is the other scenario, they were as that Catholic that when they were approached by a society that was like open beyond that, like that was more parapsychologically oriented, they may have said like, we're not doing that. So I guess there's that potential as well. If they're looking at the values and going like, "Oh no, we want a Catholic approach," like they're not going to get that from somebody like myself that's going to go in there and is going to take a purely scientific look at what's going on.
Absolutely. But that's when the contradictions begin. So
yeah.
You've got the issue of hidden minds, Morgan. And so the Smurls claimed that there was nothing wrong with the house or the foundations, and they'd had somebody come round who'd done a full evaluation of the property and told them there was nothing wrong. Just bear with me, a cat has appeared and is trying to get out of my room. Sorry.
We like animals on this show, it's okay. It's funny because Galen, for the audience, has was co-hosting our last show, and now it seems we have a kitty co-hosting this show. This is lovely. I love this. This is. I was just telling our audience, our last episode, Galen co-hosted.
Yes,
the last
with Richard.
Episode. Yes, with Richard Freeman and whatnot. So now we have a kitty co-host. This is great. Anyway, please continue.
Thank you. And so they'd made these claims that there was nothing wrong with the house, wherever. So Psychop went to the local authorities because they thought, well, we're not getting access to this. They won't let us in. They won't give us reports. There's no photos. This is the other thing. There are no photos of anything.
Yes.
At all.
There's nothing on record.
The only video that I've been able to see is the initial walkthrough that the Warrens do, which is on the Warrens' official website. That is still there. That is the only footage of this event. And as I was saying to you earlier, they were claiming to have massive damage, things blowing up, explosions, fires. There isn't one piece of evidence that supports any of that. Now, that's not to say it's not the first haunting case with things like that. And we know when you're talking about spontaneous events, as we even know these days when we've all got the megapixel phones in our pockets, the amount of times that we see things that are fairly run-of-the-mill that we miss because we're too slow or whatever. Even trying to take pictures of normal animals, never mind a spirit throwing things around a house, Morgan. It's hard. So I'm not going to essentially chastise them for not having that. However, when you've got people there who have video equipment and they're not recording things, that's when you think, hang on. And surely the first job of a paranormal investigator is to collate as much evidence as possible, be that pictorial, statements, photographic evidence, video evidence, audio evidence. There's not even tapes, audio tapes. There's none.
And that to me is where it gets strange because, I've been to plenty of investigations where there's been super active plays and I've walked out with nothing on camera. It's happened, but the audio tapes are there. Even when there's nothing that's happened, the audio tapes are there. I have a big bin in my closet, actually, of old high 8 tapes that Stephanie and I used when we first started Entity Seeker. I have a batch of them, and most of them are there's nothing on there. It's just hours of footage that's just there. So to me, the audio part is what's odd because, as I say, photographs. Hell, I've been face to face with stuff and my brain has been trying to figure out what it is. And by the time I realize it's something that I should be recording, it's gone. It's gone. It's happened to me. But yeah, the audio thing is, as a researcher, that's where things get a little strange.
Absolutely. Especially when you look at cases from the decade before. I mean, the Entity case is a prime example.
Absolutely.
There are pictures from that case.
Yeah. And video.
The San Pedro the San Pedro case that happened 10 years later. We've got video evidence, we've got photographic evidence, we've got interviews, we've got pictures. This is happening smack in the middle of these, and there's nothing, which is baffling, I think. Like you say, the first, many a good ghost hunter will tell you, Morgan, you can spend hours, day in, day out, and bugger all happens.
Absolutely.
But you've still got to take your recorder with you because sometimes you might not be able to perceive what's happening, or you may be, as you were saying, sometimes you're not really focused on what something is going on, and you might miss something because you're looking at somewhere else, or you're talking about something, and stuff's happening beneath your range, as it were. But when you listen back to your audio, you can pick it up. But we don't have any of that. So you've got all this subsidence thing that they disclaimed. So when Psychop went to the local authority, they said, well, what do they mean there's nothing wrong with the house? We've got a report here that says that this house has massive subsidence and is constantly settling. It's constantly making noises. The basement is all over the place. It's wonky, and there is a mine underneath it, which
big deal.
Yes. But this also is something to do with the local authority, because the local authority seemed a bit crap, because they kept saying there was no problems with the mines until a sinkhole appeared, and then they went, oh, hang on, yes, there is a problem with the mine. Right, and things were falling into the ground, there were holes opening up in the area, so there was a problem in the local area with subsidence, which is one of those, they denied it until holes appeared, and then they were like,
right.
oh, there's the mine, we forgot about that one. But then even you've got the issue about the smells. This is the other thing, the smells.
Yeah, the foul odors that are coming from seemingly nowhere.
Yes. So when they did the initial interviews, they constantly said that it smelled like mouldy paper. mouldy, dusty smells, like a really sort of dirty smell.
Yeah, musty.
Yeah. Which was because of the subsidence, pipes kept cracking. And so it was leaking water, and obviously mould was building up and whatever. By the time the book came out, it was raw sewage and the smell of meat, raw meat, by that
Which
point.
is typical in that type of case, that you're expecting that type of smell.
Yes.
Yeah.
But that was not mentioned in anything before the book at all. They just said it smelt mouldy. That was it. Didn't say it smelt like death or sewage or anything. However, once again, the local authority said, well, there's no issue with the sewage pipes around there. We've had no complaints. Only for Psychop and another reporter to say, hang on a minute, I've got 2 years' worth of local council meetings here. And in 95% of these meetings, the residents have told you about this damaged sewer pipe that's leaking and causing terrible smells on hot days.
Oh, jeez.
So once again, it seemed like there were things happening and the local authority were just basically saying, well, we don't want to fix stuff. And so they just deny it until they were, smacked in the face with the evidence. And so they then said, oh, magically, we'll fix this pipe. And that's where that happened. But all the neighbours, this was the other thing, Psychop were going, right, well, we can't get in the house, we can't speak to the family, we've got the records, they went through all the interviews they'd done with every newspaper and went through and started spotting inaccuracies or contradictions on both sides. But also they started interviewing the neighbours, and every single neighbour, with the exception of one, said they were lying. It's a hoax. It's not true. We don't believe them. They've got money problems. They've always had money problems. He can't hold a job down since he had to have this operation. Because the other aspect of this is that Jack had suffered his most of his adult life with water on the brain. He was struck down with pneumonia, I think, in the 70s.
Yeah, that rings a bell, yeah.
And something didn't go right with his treatment, and he ended up with water on the brain. But also, just prior to this, his mother had a massive heart attack. But they didn't seem to have the correct insurance. And so they had a lot of bills, a lot of debts. They were trying to do these house up, and then all of a sudden, the haunting occurred in the press. And so a cynical person, Morgan, may suggest that those two things may be linked. However, I am just stating the facts here. So you've got all that, but once again, there's a good 10 neighbours on this episode of Sally Jesse Raphael who are not happy. I think they seemed a lot annoyed because they just thought it was a big circus or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
And so this, essentially, you'd got all these things coming on. I mean, you've got another guy, is it Robert Gordon? Who was a leading psychiatrist at the time, who offered a free evaluation to every single member of the family. No strings attached. And they refused. Point blank. Didn't want to do it.
Yeah, it becomes so... that the lack of transparency becomes so questionable. And I think... And that's the problem with cases like this. And I mean, and I've run into cases similar in what they're claiming the phenomenon was. And interestingly enough, like, sometimes the cases will start as one thing and then escalate because of other reasons. And I question a bit if that may be what's happened even here. Because some of what catches me about this case is that the escalation that's described is either somebody who has done extensive research into how these things approach and escalate and turn it, like there's a lot of patterns within the phenomenon, what they're reporting and the escalation and the order in which they're reporting, which is like, I look and go, yeah, like that's a natural progression of this type of a thing. But what I wonder is if it started minor, and then as this went along, and there was maybe money to be made, maybe something, other factors began to escalate what was happening. Because I'm really a big believer in sometimes things start for one reason but continue for another. And I kind of wonder if in this case that's maybe potentially what we're seeing.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I mean, obviously, Michael, is it Michael, the son from the Lutz family, who is the only one who will talk to the press these days? I mean, he's always said that the house was haunted, but it was nowhere near the level that was put forward by his stepfather or the Warrens, and it just got blown out of proportion. It was just a standard haunted house. It wasn't scary. It was just stuff moving about, funny noises here, there, and everywhere, and that was it. There's nothing to say that that's perhaps maybe what would have happened here. And as I said, often in some certain haunting cases, you have a focal point of stress or trauma that's going on in a unit that can sometimes escalate or create psychic phenomena or telekinesis or things of that effect. And so who's not to say that that was happening? You'd got a family who'd lost everything, having to cohabit with Jack's parents, trying to bring up kids. He's got health issues. The mum's got health issues. They're running out of money. There's a lot of stress. It's the 70s. The economy's tanking all around the world. It's a hard time to be bringing up a family in a house that's apparently falling apart. But added to all this, of course, is the fact that their eldest daughter, Dawn, is really the one that kind of torpedoes them. Because she seemed to really like talking to the press. Too much, perhaps. She was always very willing to be front and centre at pictures and interviews, and she was always happy to talk to anybody about it, tell them how terrifying this was. And people began to understand that her stories didn't match up either. She kept getting her dates wrong. She kept saying things had happened that the other members of the family said hadn't happened in that order, or the dates were wrong. And then you've got the succubus and the incubus is turning up as well. And you just... It starts to get to a point where there could have been a kernel of truth into what was happening. There could have been a minor haunting, like I say, with the renovation. And once again, as we were saying, classic hauntings. You start doing some renovation, it tends to wake things up in certain cases. Who's to say that that didn't happen here? But the guy that they bought the house off had said in the 17 years he'd owned the property, he'd never had anything. Any issues, any problems, anything. And as I say, the people that moved in afterwards, nothing. Very Amityville-like.
But just to play devil's advocate on that, because I've had that with various cases as well. And the one thing that I've found is that, and not to say this is right or wrong in regards to the Smurl case, but what I have found is that people, you really have to be sort of resonating within a certain headspace in order to experience certain phenomenon. And
absolutely,
if you've got people that are under like that level of stress, that level of just mental issues and strain as to what's going on, and then you get a family that moves in that is not in that vibrational space, they're not going to see it. Like they're not going to have those experiences. So like, because a lot of people say, well, nothing happened when I moved in. Well, maybe not. You know, if you're not vibrationally resonating with that, you're probably not going to experience it if at all. So just to throw them a bone, that could be what was going on there.
No, I completely agree as well, because you've got to have the catalyst. And, you know, there could have been very settled people either side of them that bookended them. So just because they didn't experience anything doesn't negate everything they say. It happens time and time again, like I say. I mean, I keep going back to Amityville, but that's the same. I mean, I once heard somebody say that nothing had happened at the Lutz house before they moved in. And I thought, are you missing that mass murder that occurred there the year previous? I think that's my definition of something happening there, in my opinion, Morgan.
It would qualify. It would. Yes. It fits the definition.
Absolutely. But there are usually a reason or a catalyst that, you know, perfect storm of stress, really. So I'm with you there. That's what I'm saying. I also want to throw them a bone in regards to just because other people didn't experience it doesn't mean something wasn't happening at the start.
Yeah. And I wonder too if because of the religious aspect of it, and I've run into this with specifically Catholics often, is that they see this phenomenon, or many of them, not all of them, don't write me letters. So, but many of them see this phenomenon, no matter what it is on the paranormal spectrum, as evil. It's evil. Like I had an ex years ago who had a very Catholic family, and his aunt talked to me for a very long time until his aunt discovered that I was a parapsychology researcher. That point on, I was evil. This was bad. It was so right away, their headspace would go to, whatever happens is a bigger deal than what it is. This is scary. This is terrifying. This is so. Some of this too may be the filter that you're processing information with, right? Like we tend to, no matter what person we're talking about, no matter what religion, if or not, we're always trying to relate our world to the construct that we've created, and everything that we're experiencing is like passing through that filter.
Yes.
And so if you've got that filter of that religiosity, you can see again how this could, something like a chair moving across the room, become something demonic.
Yes.
Immediately, you know what I mean? Immediately.
Yeah. Absolutely. But I mean, the other key thing about all this is the reluctance of their local diocese to get involved. Because, as we've said, these were devoted Catholics. They would clearly have been well known in their church. Obviously. And if there's one thing I know about the Catholic Church and the paranormal is, they love an exorcism.
Some of them. I will tell. Well, I'll tell you, like the experiences in the past that I've had with like clients that have been Catholic, at least here in Canada, the church will not help. That I've had. So that may be a possibility as well, that they turned around because they didn't want the reputation anymore of we are the church of the crazy exorcists, because that was around the time that people, the church at least started to back off of that, where they were like, that's our reputation, we're not these crazy kooks. So I've had it where they have turned around and said, and I mean, as I say, I'm not religious, I'm not Christian, but I have, but in order to help certain clients, if that's their belief system, that's where I have to go. Right. And they're very, at least in Canada, very cagey about it. So I don't know how they are over there, but it could be a red flag that they didn't help, but I don't know.
Yeah, it's a strange one. Because I can't think of another case of that era where the church has refused to get involved.
Yeah.
Usually they will be quite happy to help in some capacity, even if it's just for spiritual guidance, Morgan.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Or giving them assistance when they come to church or spending time with them. The Smurls constantly said that they just were told they wouldn't help in any level, and I find that odd. So you've got them claiming the church won't help them as well as everything else, but then they do. But they only do it because they've basically been called out in the press.
Yeah, reputation. Again, reputation, right?
Yeah, but even then, they were really reticent to kind of say if they believe the family or what. It's almost as if they didn't want to pour fuel on the fire, which for me does become a bit of a red flag. Let's call it a pink flag, perhaps.
Yeah.
That seems unusual, because if you have something that can basically be a brilliant advert for the power of God and the Catholic belief system, surely you would want to support that, and your parishioners, your flock need your help. That's entirely what to do. But to say they were getting involved, they kind of danced around it.
Yeah.
And didn't want to do the exorcism or whatever. And so you've got that added to it, that devoted Catholics, known in the area, regular churchgoers, their church wouldn't help them. But usually they would even, I've seen cases where they've said, well, we haven't got anybody who's ordained to be an exorcist here. However, such and such in this diocese can, and therefore we will they will usually make a call and pass the case around until somebody says, yeah, I'll take a look. So you've got that aspect to it as well. But you've got this absolute cast iron refusal to let anybody in the house at all.
That to me is where it gets really, really fishy. Like, what was the orders that came down, and where did they come from? That, I think, becomes the question.
Yeah. Well, there is a famous image of Jack and Ed and Lorraine on the porch of the property arguing with members of the press, saying that I think they made this really odd statement that they would refuse access or interviews with anybody that was unsympathetic to the family and the case, which by this point was essentially everybody else.
Right.
So straight away, you've got all this going off. You've got all the information that Psychops uncovered. You've got all the statements from the neighbours that they've taken. You've also got this very weird aspect of, obviously there are some very unsavoury allegations in this particular case as well of supernatural sexual harassment, not just the succubus and the incubus. Allegedly, the children were being targeted for assault in a variety of ways. One of their cousins in an interview admitted that he would hide in the house and tickle the kids at night because he thought it was hilarious, and it really frightened them all. And he signed an affidavit to that and said it was me. I was the one that was tickling them, and whether he went as far as to molest them, I'm not sure, Morgan.
Yeah.
But that's on record as well. That he was
bringing that out as researchers or whatever, like even just putting that into the public domain of information as like, oh, this is what these entities are doing in the house.
Yes.
That's, you can't get much more explosive than that, right? Like, it's one thing when it's going on with adults and, you're making claims and whatever, but when you're now, the kids are claiming it or you're claiming whatever's going on, that to me is where this gets insane to me.
Yeah. And I think that's where they lost the public as well, completely. Because most people were saying, why on earth are you subjecting your children to this? Why haven't you moved? Why haven't you left? How could you let your children go through this? This is awful. This is terrible parenting. So they completely lost it then, because they've got the moral high ground has gone. Because whatever they claimed, whether it was true or not or exaggerated, Morgan, if you're saying things like that in a book, people are going to read that and go, well, if that was my children, I'd be out there in the blink of an eye. I'd send my children away. I'd keep them out of the house. I wouldn't put them through that. And this is where people are saying, hang on a minute, have you said this has been going on for 18 months? 5 years? 13 years? So your children have been abused like this for over a decade and you've not done anything. And straight away, you begin to think, is it a case of trying to shut the stable door after the horse has bolted? Because you can't say that and then try and walk it back. It's in print, it's in the book. Yeah,
you can't unring that bell. Like that's and that either happened or didn't. That's the thing. That's not a well, I think I saw my keys fly off the hook, or maybe it fell. That's not up for conjecture. That either happened or it did not happen.
Precisely. Yes, absolutely. But even for one of the cousins to come forward and say, well, actually it was me, well, how far did he go? Because this is the other aspect. Sexual abuse is a terrible thing. And in the majority of cases, it's committed by relatives. We've no idea what was going on in this family. Like I say, you've got this one member of the family who admitted he was doing something. However, is that kind of, I'm just going to say I was tickling them as a defence mechanism, when really it was a bit more full on than that, and very deeply unsavoury things. Because sadly, in my experience of working with rehabilitating offenders, there is often a denial of the seriousness of certain crimes that are committed by people, especially of a sexual nature. And it's a subject I know more about than I would ever wish to have wanted to, shall I say, due to my employment in the previous lives that I've led. And so when I see things like that, that also comes off as a red flag, because that's usually they're trying to diffuse the level of allegation, shall we say, by saying, oh, it's not that bad, it was just this. Yeah. Oh, well, I didn't mean to offend them, I was just wanting a hug. Those kinds of things. And so there's language in some of those statements that when you've worked in that particular field, another red flag straight away, because that kind of sounds like somebody's done something pretty bad. People know they've done something pretty bad, but they're just trying to diffuse it.
Minimize and deflect.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And I think...
Well, and you would know because of your prior job. I mean, you saw it all the time.
Yes, absolutely. And so the thing about this is that it blew up in their faces. I think the book was the worst thing that they could have done. Because from that point on, they had essentially lost the vast majority of the general public who were interested in these particular things. I mean, there are some people, as we said at the beginning, there are some people who, to this day, consider this to be one of the most important and clear cases of the paranormal, especially in America. And yet, there's no photos, there's no audio, there's no video. The vast majority of people involved in the case were saying, there's nothing happening here. And you've basically got 6 people and the Warrens saying this is true and everybody else is wrong. But it just keeps coming back. It won't leave us alone. Like I said, this is the third film. I mean, this is the other aspect. It wasn't the last case the Warrens dealt with either.
No,
they continued for at least 10 years after this.
Yeah, I knew Lorraine Warren. Like I knew her. I worked with her on a case in Edmonton, just over the phone or whatever, and whatnot. So I mean, yeah, they were. I mean, Lorraine kept going after Ed passed away.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, there's the movie version of their chronological career, and then there's the records we have. So we know this is the other strange thing. It's a very big thing, but also one of the children recently announced a statement saying that they'd spoken to the studio and the director, and they'd gone through their story with them, and then they were invited to the premiere, and he said, well, that they clearly didn't listen to a word we've said, because there's not, most of this film didn't happen to this level. And so when you've got members of the family saying this story doesn't make us, just isn't right, then who is benefiting from this then? And once again, you've got the experiencers and the witnesses who have completely lost control of their own story. They have no control over this now. The Smurl story is not their story anymore. It's ours, whether we want it or not, sadly.
Yeah, isn't that true? Like, and again, I think it's right back to the beginning of what we were talking about, is when you lose control of the narrative, shit gets bad. Like, that's just how it is. And I think I suspect that is probably what's happened with this case, is that it started as one thing and became and continued for another reason. And usually those two things have very little to do with each other. And it just strikes me from an investigator's perspective. And I mean, I haven't, just to clarify, I haven't spoken to the Smurl family. I knew Lorraine when she was alive for a short time. But yeah, that's how this comes off to me. And I don't want to diminish their experience by any ways, because I mean, I think they experienced what they experienced, but there's so much here that screams the idea that the media, the people involved, everybody had too many fingers in the pie and they had too much to gain from it. Yes. And when that happens, everything's off the table at that point. It's crazy. And I think that's the one thing we've talked about this. God, I don't know how many times on this show, is the fact that, and it reminds me actually of Kenneth Arnold's flying saucer account, when he described the flying saucer. He didn't just say a flying saucer, but the media took it, grabbed it, said it was a flying saucer, and then everybody's seeing flying saucers. And it's not diminishing that Kenneth Arnold saw something. He did. But that's not what happened. And now it's this, everything spun. And here we are again, like you're saying, how many years later, and we're sitting in a theater with yet another version that's not right of what went on. It's crazy.
It is. It is. And it's typical, though, sadly.
Absolutely it is.
I mean, I've yet to see anybody do Enfield properly without exaggeration or stupidity. I mean, obviously, it's the second Conjuring film, you know, and as I'm sure we've mentioned, the Warrens spent 3 hours there.
Yeah.
And we're very firmly told to bugger off by Guy Lyon Playfair as soon as Ed told him, "Do you know how much money you can make out of this?" And Guy said, "Well, I'm not really bothered. Ta-ra. On your bike, sir.
Yeah.
Good day."
Yes.
In his way, as he would do, Guy. So I think the legacy of this particular case, I think, is one of those that the key aspect for this, another one of them, is that Jack, obviously, as I said, had this operation in 1983, which apparently caused memory issues, short-term memory loss, and brain fog in general. When they first came out with the story, that was the 18-month period from him having the operation to them going to the press. That's the 18 months. So it started just after he'd come out of hospital and began his convalescence. And then they claimed it. And then it turned to 5 years. And then it became throughout their entire history of living in this particular house. And so we've got 3 start dates. Well, they can't all be right. And so, like you say, there are aspects of certain cases where I think there's a kernel of truth in it somewhere. But there's so many layers, so many people, as you refer to, sticking their finger in the pie, so many angles to this, that I think you have to basically disregard everything after they said they're not going to talk to anybody anymore. Because that's the best record we've got. Because after that, it becomes a very, very different story. Because what they say in the press and what they say in the book... Sorry, I'll do that again because I've just punched my microphone. What they said in the press and what they said in the book seem to be almost 2 different hauntings. The one in the book is like full-on demons running amok in the house, sexual assaults. The only thing we're missing is the walls crying blood and the like. But it's also... The book's quite cliched. If you put it next to the Amityville horror book and... there's another book around the same era. And they're essentially the same template. You've got, insects, priest battling, multiple exorcisms. You've got strange smells. It's the Exorcist template that's just been applied to different properties, it would seem. And it's a shame because these days certain cases have a life of their own and seem to continue, and with the film coming out, it's just once again lit a fire under this again. Because every time you think, surely we're going to leave the Smurl case where it belongs in the 1980s, and then you're like, no, not again. But I suspect it won't be the last. I also suspect, I doubt it'll be the last Conjuring film.
No, I don't think so either. I think there's going to be about 10 spin-offs. That's my prediction.
Even more.
That's my prediction. At least. And I think that's interesting that you brought up the idea of of The Exorcist being this template. And I think that's one thing that we need to touch on before we go is the influence that the film culture, media, all of that has over how we tell stories. Because we really are built to mold things like we were talking about through a certain perception and whatnot. And I don't think that people realize how much things like film, television, all of that really do shape what we think is reality that's going on. And the influence that the Exorcist film had over the culture at that time was insane. I mean, people were running out of the theater. They were throwing up. They were traumatized. They were so here and that was based from a real case. So it makes you wonder like how much of that is in the public subconscious and perception as they're moving through. So they end up with, say, for example, like a genuine haunting or maybe psychokinetic activity or whatever. If you've got that going on in your mind and you've just come from that, and that's your framework, especially as somebody who is religious, if that's your framework for what's happening, you're terrified, right? As soon as that first thing happens, you're terrified. So there's that aspect, I think, of things like this too, is we have to realize that what's going on around us, what we're observing, what we're thinking about, we really do, A, create it, and B, are influenced by it big time.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and it's ironic that it's a very hard to find segment, but Jason Miller, who obviously plays Father Karras in The Exorcist, is also visited the Smurl house.
Did he? See, I did not know that.
You can find, if you Google Jason Miller Smurl house, you will find a picture of him stood on the porch.
For heaven's sakes. So he was interested.
Well, yeah, he was doing some TV stuff, and he was obviously so connected to The Exorcist, he'd basically become typecast by the media. And so whenever they would do these kind of paranormal shows, Jason Miller would be asked to front them. And he did a few of them in the 80s, and there is footage and there is photographic evidence of Miller being at the house, looking very much like he'd styled himself after Robin Williams in Mork and Mindy, I have to say.
That's very funny.
In his style guise, he's got a lot of colours going on there. But he was clearly tied to the paranormal by that point, to the extent that he was the media's man on the inside, as it were. Now, I've not seen the segment because I know he did film one, but whether it's been lost to time, I don't know. But the photos are out there.
Isn't that's so interesting, and really it plays to our point, right? Like, I mean,
yes.
People are literally associating the paranormal with an actor who's got nothing to do with it.
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
like that's kind of crazy. Like, that's kind of crazy. And here you've got people at the time, like, you know, Guy Playfair, and you've got these, you know, Maurice Grosse, or like people that are genuinely researchers, and everybody's like looking to the actor that was in this movie as this authority on the paranormal. Like, it's funny how the mind works, the human mind, and what we do to ourselves. Why do we do this?
Yeah, absolutely. I suppose it's difficult for some of them because you become so associated with a role or a concept or a cultural phenomenon, as The Exorcist was, which, 50 years on, I think some people miss just how genuinely powerful and all-present that film was during that first year of release, to the point that, even as a child growing up, it was a film all my friends knew about, everybody talked about it, but in the
Absolutely.
UK it was banned, so we couldn't see it. Well, allegedly.
Sure you couldn't.
No, not at all. No. So when I eventually saw it cleaned up, it was great because I could actually see most of what was happening. But it was banned here in the UK for 25 years. 1998, I think, was the first time it was re-shown on general release in the UK, and I went to see it for the 25th anniversary. And then it was finally released on DVD and video here in the UK, which is crazy. Because we always like to pretend we're really sort of laid back and cool and forward thinking, and we banned The Exorcist for 25 years.
Crazy. That's crazy. Well, I'll leave people with this one interesting story that's very present as to how our minds work. Is that if anybody out there watched Law and Order SVU, and of course it's one of the longest running shows, and Richard Belzer, who was an amazing actor, played Detective John Munch, and he was a conspiracy theorist on the show, which was great. Yes. And he'd been in, which I love. I just love John. But he reported at one point, it was a few years before he passed away, that he was out walking along in New York, and he was present, and I think it was a mugging. Something happened anyway on the streets and in front of him, and he was like, of course, the citizen going, "Oh my God, what's going on?" And the people around him started yelling at him because he was the cop that was supposed to stop what was going on, and he was like, "What the hell, guys? Like, I'm." I'm a comedian. What are you talking about? But people were genuinely mad at him because they're like, you're a detective. What's wrong with you? And it's like, here we are, like in this day and age, and people are still not getting this. Like, this is how ingrained this is into people's heads. Like, it's pretty wild. So, but Paul, thank you so much for all of this amazing discussion. Ghost Story Guys and all of that, where can people find you? Because they have to.
Absolutely. You can find me on my show, which is Mysteries and Monsters, which is across all social media platforms and podcast sites. And I co-host with one of your fellow countrymen, Brennan, the Ghost Story Guys. And that is also available across all social media platforms and all great and probably some dodgy podcast sites as well.
There's always those. And yeah, guys, go out, subscribe, and download, because the shows are fantastic. If you want more discussion like this, Paul's shows are the place to go for it. It's intelligent. The conversations are amazing, and I've been on a number of times. Phenomenal people that he's got on, and great questions. So definitely go download. Paul, thank you so much.
Always a pleasure. Lovely to see you. Lovely to spend time in your company, Morgan.
Well, if you guys don't have a lot of questions after that episode, there isn't nothing I can do for you. This is such an interesting story, and one that takes a number of bizarre twists and turns, as you guys just heard. And it really begins to push us to ask more questions about these cases. Now, interestingly enough, even though the Smurl Haunting was a rather extreme case, whether you believe the side that there was this horrendous haunting going on, or you maybe fall on the more skeptical side. Regardless, this case opens a lot of questions, and it really is what many investigators face, especially like the Society of Psychical Research, who dealt with the Enfield haunting. You guys might remember that from the second Conjuring film, as well as many others. And these are the type of situations that researchers actually have to deal with. This is real life. And many times you're dealing with actual paranormal phenomenon intermixed with maybe people lying or people misrepresenting things. And then if you get these outside sources that are coming in and you've got all of these fingers in the pie, it becomes almost impossible to untwist a case like this. It's very, very, very difficult. So many people ask, well, should I go to the media? Should I get attention for this? What do I do? Honestly, from a researcher's perspective and my personal perspective, I find that's one of the worst things that people can really do when they're in this type of situation, if that's what you believe is going on. And one of the reasons why is really for the same reason that police and investigators often tell eyewitnesses and crime victims and things like that, please let us do the work, because it just becomes so entangled with opinions and then false information getting out and the media trying to create headlines. We can't forget about that aspect of it, is that they're always going to be pushing and pushing and pushing for the most extreme headline. So this is a really fascinating case. I would love to know what you guys think about it. You can always join our discussion on supernatural circumstances after the show on Facebook. It's a group there. You guys can put your opinion in. I'd love to know what you guys are thinking about this, because it is very convoluted, and I don't think there is necessarily a clear-cut answer. As I said to Paul in the show, sometimes things start for one reason but continue for another. And my personal opinion is I think that's one of those cases. And when you get all these stories and involvement from other people, it's kind of like the game of telephone after a while. And motives start to become unclear, or people that come in that have different agendas. It's pretty crazy. But the Warrens, who of course were the main feature of the Conjuring film, weren't involved in this case really much at all. They barely had a dog in the fight with this one, which is very, very interesting. And but again, the game of telephone, things get turned around, things get twisted, and next thing you know, you've got a completely different story. So anyway, it's something to think about. as we move into this Halloween season. Guys, we're getting close. We are getting close. What, like 2 weeks away from Halloween. This is crazy. And we've got a amazing episode coming up in the next couple of weeks. We are celebrating the release of a amazing documentary that I'm so excited about, and I can't wait for you guys to see it. I can't wait for you guys to be a part of all of this that's coming up. Anyway, we're going to talk about that next episode. Anyway, thank you for joining us on this eerie expedition, dear listeners. And remember, there is no line between the natural and the supernatural. All is consciousness. Until next time, stay curious, friends. Supernatural Circumstances is a co-production of Entity Seeker, Paranormal Research and Teachings, and the 20th Plane. This podcast is a part of the Curious Cast podcast network. You can find out more about me, Morgan Knudsen, and book me for live appearances at entityseeker.ca. You can also email the show at supernaturalcircumstances.com.